The French Foreign Minister Bernard Kouchner has said that the world should prepare itself for a possible war with Iran over the nuclear crisis. He said in an interview on French radio and television that war would be the worst scenario and that seeking a solution through talks should take priority. Later this week, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany meet to consider further sanctions against Iran.
This was hardly standard diplomatic language from the French Foreign Minister. It went beyond mere talk of considering other options if negotiations failed. Bernard Kouchner said on French television that the world should be prepared for the worst over the Iranian nuclear crisis, and that meant possible war. He also called on the EU to prepare its own economic sanctions against Tehran, to send a serious message, he said, if the Iranians continued to refuse to suspend their nuclear project.
Our Iranian friends want to build a civil nuclear program. Everything they do seems to point to the contrary. That's why we're worried. We've decided during negotiations to impose sanctions beyond the remit of the UN. We must prepare for the worst. The worst is war.
The comments are another example of a more assertive French stance on the world stage. During a recent surprise visit to Baghdad, Bernard Kouchner showed he wasn't afraid to speak his mind, criticising the various factions before apologising for interfering in internal Iraqi affairs. His comments on Iran echo those of President Sarkozy, who last month also took a tough line in evoking a possible conflict. France is keen to stress, though, that negotiations should take priority and that no military conflict is imminent. The Foreign Minister says France has asked its companies, notably Total and Gaz de France, not to undertake new work in Iran. Both firms have been involved in negotiations over new gas installations. This week, Bernard Kouchner will take his message on Iran first to Moscow, then to Washington, where it should find favour with American ears. Alistair Sanford, BBC News, Paris.
Well, this is BBC News is still ahead. A supermodel in the making or exploited child? The Australian schoolgirl is causing a storm on and off the catwalk. Here in the UK, Northern Rock savers have withdrawn about £2 billion from the bank since Friday. Although branches were closed, many internet account holders have continued trying to get their money out. Northern Rock insists that its customers have absolutely nothing to fear. Here's John Moylan.
At Northern Rock's headquarters in Newcastle, staff have been working through the weekend. They're grappling with the unprecedented events that have seen almost £2 billion leaving the bank's coffers. Since Friday, savers have been queuing up to withdraw their cash at branches across the UK. Many fear for the very future of the business, despite the assurances of its chief executive.
I think it's a hard slog, undoubtedly. Days like the last few days don't help the brand, but based on what people normally get from Northern Rock, which is good service, good products, low costs, very efficient operation, good competitive products. Yes, I think with a hard slog, it can recover, but I have to say it'll be a hard slog, but we're up for it.
The sums that have been withdrawn are huge. Savers have taken out close to £2 billion from branches or online. The company also has almost £10 billion in postal accounts. Now, requests to transfer that cash will arrive in earnest this week. But it's shareholders that have been the hardest hit. Northern Rock shares have been tumbling for months. They're now down 65% since February. Northern Rock was forced to go cap in hand to the Bank of England last week. Its normal sources of finance had dried up due to the global credit crunch triggered by bad loans in the US. Now David Cameron's Conservatives have gone on the offensive, saying the Northern Rock crisis raises wider questions about Labour's economic record.
There is a genuine question about the handling of the economy over the last 10 years, Gordon Brown's stewardship as Chancellor, and whether we have in fact created an economy built on debt, on government debt and on consumer debt, and whether that has left us more exposed to economic instability and to the global financial turbulence.
David Cameron, I think, thinks he sees a bandwagon and is trying to jump onto it. You know, our borrowing, for example, is a lot less than it was when he was an economic advisor with Norman Lamont at the Treasury 15 years ago.
What's not known is whether the credit crunch will harm the wider economy. The City, which sold off shares on Friday, will give its verdict in the morning. John Moylan, BBC News.
You're watching BBC News. A reminder of our headlines. Thai investigators are looking for evidence among the wreckage of a budget airliner that crashed in the resort of Phuket, killing at least 88 people. Former American football star O.J. Simpson has been arrested by police in Las Vegas over an alleged armed robbery. Demonstrations have taken place in countries around the world to highlight the crisis in the Sudanese region of Darfur, where at least 200,000 people have died in over 4 years of conflict. Demonstrators are demanding action from world leaders when they meet at the United Nations this week.
A smart street in the centre of London, but the talk, and indeed the shouting, was all of Sudan and Darfur. People gathered outside the Sudanese embassy before marching to the home and office of the British Prime Minister.
Hundreds of demonstrators have come here to Downing Street, many of them are Sudanese, refugees here in London. The central message here is to encourage the world not to look away, and to make that point, many of them are wearing blindfolds across their eyes.
But we come here to send a message that we need action. We need action in Darfur. Civilians have been killing. Women have been raping, and this has been going on for years and years. We have many resolutions, but we need action.
Okay. Well, you've got 26,000 peacekeepers are due to come to Darfur from the United Nations, from the African Union. Is that going to make the difference? Is that going to end the war?
Definitely. If it's not just begin in the media, we want them in the ground. If they're in the ground, definitely they will going to make a difference.
This was Rome, where a similar demonstration was being held. Organisers said 30 countries around the world were taking part. In Paris, a big screen showed a film about the conflict. The leader of one of Darfur's rebel groups was also there. He's currently refusing to attend peace talks.
We need first to stop this genocide, and this will not be stopped unless there will be UN, a strong UN force on the ground with full mandate. This is why I'm calling here with all our people here, for France, those who believe in humanity, those who believe in democracy and liberality, to go there, to stop ongoing killing, to stop killing of our people.
So Darfur's 2 million displaced people must carry on waiting for talks next month between government and rebels, waiting for the new 26,000 strong peacekeeping force to arrive, and hoping that the conflict that gets more complicated with every passing year can somehow be resolved. Jonah Fisher, BBC News.
I'm joining me now with Hamish Faulkner, head of Sudan Divestment UK, an organisation which campaigns for companies to put pressure on the Khartoum government by cutting trade links. Welcome to the studio. Nice to see you. So which countries and companies are you targeting in particular? I suppose some of the biggest trading partners, ideally.
I mean, we target a variety of different countries. I mean, I think viewers would be surprised how many different countries are involved in the Sudanese oil industry, which is incredibly problematic in the Darfur context. I mean, the worst offenders are China, who's received a lot of negative coverage for this already, but also India, Japan and Malaysia, 3 countries who've really not received very much criticism for their oil in Darfur, despite the fact that their investments are really helping prop up the Khartoum regime, despite the massive international pressure, the types of which we've seen today.
Some countries, though, are listening to what you're saying and are doing what you ask. So are you aiming for economic stranglehold on Khartoum, ultimately?
I mean, the talk of economic stranglehold is best focused actually on Khartoum, because where we do really want to put pressure is on the Khartoum elites. It's worth remembering in the Sudanese context that, by and large, the government of Sudan only really has meaningful power within Khartoum, and that it's that Khartoum elite who is trying to control an extremely large country through the oppressive means you see in Darfur. So the aim of the campaign is to put that sort of stranglehold on that very particular area in Khartoum.
Just to stay with that point for a moment, if you're making matters worse in Khartoum, aren't you automatically making matters worse for the people of Darfur?
No, you're not. I mean, it's worth remembering that the oil industry in Sudan has long been almost solely benefited the elites in Khartoum. It's people within the government and, for example, the president's brother, who owns a company called High Tech, who are benefiting overwhelmingly from the oil industry, and very few benefits from the massive economic boom that Sudan has seen on the back of the oil industry have filtered through to the people.
Just very briefly, isn't this ultimately a political matter which will be resolved through negotiation and diplomacy rather than through economics?
No, I think negotiations and diplomacy are incredibly important, but 4 years on it's clear that real pressure needs to be put on Khartoum, and where Khartoum is vulnerable is to its oil revenue, to its economics.
Hamish Falkland, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, she's in her first year of secondary school in Australia and turned 13 on Sunday, but Madison Gabriel is causing a storm in fashion and political circles. She's been chosen as the face of Gold Coast Fashion Week, and the Australian Prime Minister John Howard is calling the decision exploitative. Nick Bryant reports from Sydney.
Supermodel in the making or exploited child? Madison Gabriel.